the earth awakened.
Make you feel the truth.
Need your help.
Okay, let's have a look.
I want this.
Well, life's a gift.
Baik, selamat pagi, selamat datang di FSAI 2022, film Masterclass dengan topik menciptakan konten animasi. Nama saya Regina Halim, Public Diplomacy Officer di Konsulat Jenderal Australia di Surabaya. Sebelum kita memulai acara ini, saya ingin memberikan informasi bahwa fasilitas interpretasi simultan dalam bahasa Indonesia tersedia sepanjang Masterclass ini. Jadi untuk teman-teman semua yang ingin melakukan atau mendapatkan interpretasi simultan, dapat melakukan pengaturan dengan cara klik icon interpretation yang ada di layar teman-teman, dan pilih bahasa yang diinginkan. Kami ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Universitas Bina Nusantara School of Design dan Universitas Kristen Petra Surabaya yang telah sangat membantu penyelenggaraan Masterclass pada hari ini. Selamat datang kepada pembicara dan film Masterclass pilar ini, yaitu Barbara Stephen, CEO and Managing Director Flying Park Productions, dan Marisa Anita sebagai sahabat FSAI 2022 yang akan menjadi moderator pada hari ini. Kami ingin mengucapkan terima kasih kepada Kementerian Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif atau Badan Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia atas dukungannya yang luar biasa dalam FSAI 2022. Untuk memulai acara ini, langsung saja kita lihat bersama video kata sambutan dari Bapak Sandiaga Uno, Menteri Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya. Salam sehat. Greetings for all of us. Creative economy with all of its uniqueness is proven able to survive and grow positively. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the exports value of Indonesia's creative economy is showing growth from 2021 with $20.58 billion to $21.28 billion. Indonesia's creative economy contribution is ranked third in the world in percentage of creative economic contributions to GDP. This position is right after the United States with Hollywood and South Korea with its K-pop. Film is one of the subsectors of creative economy that affected, and this pandemic has changed the film industry. Even though now the cinema building has been reopened for public with strict health protocol, Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy has some priority programs to increase the development of the film subsector, such as Family Sunday Movie, film accelerations, and incubations program. The best quality film we produce is going to be included in various festivals, both national and international, in hopes that filmmakers could work from the roots of the culture, and the local wisdom of the nation can be a potential power that elevates Indonesia's dignity. Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia presents the best film from Australia and Indonesia. It will highlight the Australia and Indonesia through the world of cinema. We hope this festival could strengthen relations between the two countries and encourage filmmakers to create better quality of films in the future. Thank you very much. Good night. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Santi, Santi, Santi Om.
Oh, wonderful Indonesia.
Baiklah, demikian video kata sambutan dari Bapak Sandiaga Uno, Menteri Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia. Langsung saja, saya juga ingin mengundang Ibu Fiona Hogarth, selaku Konsul Jenderal dari Australian Consulate General in Surabaya untuk memberikan kata sambutannya.
Selamat pagi teman-teman di seluruh Indonesia dan selamat siang untuk Ibu Barbara in Sydney. Good afternoon to you, Barbara. So happy you could be here. Saya selaku Konsul Jenderal di Surabaya senang mendapat kesempatan untuk berpartisipasi di acara Festival Cinema Australia Indonesia tahun 2022 ini. Saya mengucapkan terima kasih matur suksema untuk Kementerian Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Indonesia secara terkhusus Bapak Menteri Sandiaga Uno selaku Menteri Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Indonesia yang telah mendukung film festival ini. Saya juga mengucapkan terima kasih kepada partner Universitas FSAI Masterclass hari ini, Universitas Binus Jakarta, dan UK Petra Surabaya, matur suwun. Satu dari universitas-universitas swasta terbaik di masing-masing daerahnya. Kami bangga dapat bermitra dengan Anda untuk Masterclass hari ini. Dan tentunya saya menghargai dukungan dari partner komunitas film kami Invis Surabaya untuk dukungan selama ini. Selamat datang dan bergabung kepada semua mahasiswa dan para calon kreator film yang telah hadir bersama kita di hari ini. Khususnya mahasiswa dari Universitas Binus dan Christian Petra. Terima kasih telah bergabung dengan kami hari ini. Kita akan belajar banyak mengenai animasi di Masterclass kali ini. Australia ada rumah bagi beberapa bakat terbaik dunia di industri film dan televisi, baik yang ada di depan layar maupun di belakang layar. Jajaran film FSAI tahun ini serta para ahli yang bergabung sebagai pembicara dalam sesi Masterclass merupakan demonstrasi keunggulan Australia. Hari ini kita akan mendengar dari pakar para industri animasi Australia, Barbara Stephen, CEO dan Managing Director dari studio animasi pemenang penghargaan Flying Buck Production di Sydney, yang turut memproduksi film What If, Marvel, Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles dari Nickelodeon, dan film trilogi lebih. Barbara akan membagi wawasan tentang proses kreatif di balik film laris internasional dan kisah sukses premium video on demand domestik 100% off. Dengan pengalamannya yang lebih dari 1 dekade di bidang animasi, Barbara akan memberikan pengetahuan dan keahliannya tentang industri ini kepada animator dan pembuat film Indonesia generasi berikutnya. Sahabat FSAI kami di tahun 2022, Marissa Anita akan menemani kita semua hari ini sebagai moderator selama Masterclass ini berlangsung. Marissa bukan hanya sekedar sahabat FSAI, dia adalah sahabat dari Kedutaan Besar Australia di Jakarta dan salah satu alumni Australia yang sangat kami banggakan. Marissa belajar tentang jurnalisme di University of Sydney. Melalui FSAI dan kelas film Masterclass ini, kami berharap dapat membantu membangun hubungan yang lebih kuat antara komunitas film Australia dan Indonesia dan mendukung calon pembuat film untuk mengembangkan karir mereka. Saya harap teman-teman akan menikmati sesi hari ini dan dapat mengambil beberapa hal baru untuk proyek kreatif Anda berikutnya. Terima kasih dan selamat penonton, selamat sukses dan salam sehat.
Baik, terima kasih Bu Fiona untuk kata sambutannya. Dan teman-teman, karena kita sudah mendengar kata sambutan dari Bapak Menteri Sandiaga Uno dan juga Ibu Fiona Hogarth, langsung saja kita mulai sesi Masterclass ini. Selama mengikuti Masterclass ini, jika teman-teman memiliki pertanyaan, silakan pertanyaannya dicatat terlebih dahulu karena kita akan punya sesi tanya-jawab di akhir sesi diskusi nanti. Kami akan berikan hadiah merchandise dan snack spesial FSAI bagi 3 pemenang beruntung. Saya ingin mengundang moderator untuk diskusi kita pada hari ini. Dia adalah sahabat FSAI 2022, alumni Australia, Marissa Anita. Halo Marissa. Apa kabar?
Halo Regina, I'm good, thank you. Apa kabar?
I couldn't be better. Senang bersama dengan Marisa hari ini.
Thank you loh, thank you. Aku juga senang bisa bersama dengan teman-teman dari Kedutaan Australia dan juga teman-teman yang sudah ada di sini untuk mengikuti masterclass kita hari ini. Apakah boleh langsung dimulai, Regina?
Sure, silakan ambil alih sesi diskusi kita, Marisa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Nah, selamat pagi teman-teman. Sudah ada sekitar 250-an partisipan di sini. Langsung saja saya perkenalkan ya narasumber kita di pagi hari ini untuk Masterclass Creating Animated Content adalah Barbara Steven. Dia adalah CEO dan Managing Director dari Flying Bark Productions Sydney. Dari sekian banyak film animasi yang sudah dia buat, yang sekarang lagi tayang di FSAI 2022 adalah 100% Wolf. Nah, Barbara ini punya pengalaman lebih dari 1 dekade. Langsung saja kita sapa. Hello, good morning, Babs. How are you?
Hello, thank you for having me, and thank you to the Ministry and to the Consular General as well for the opening remarks.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for joining us to share your knowledge and expertise in producing animation.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it's exciting to see so many participants.
Exactly, right? There are 250 participants now joining from all over Indonesia, probably. So my first question to you, Babs, is what drew you to animation in the first place? What made you decide that this would be a lifelong career for you?
Well, I actually studied a communications degree at university, and so I originally expected that I would be going perhaps into more of a position in politics or somewhere, something like that. But I quickly found a passion for producing, because I landed a job with a production company that was producing the opening ceremony content for the Sydney Olympics, and it was a fabulous, exciting time in Sydney, and producing this beautiful content that was going to be screened all around the world was such a thrill for me, and I guess it led to my interest and then a love for animation, because we were really looking at that time at producing work that was with essentially creative screen content, but that was also very much guided by technology. And it was the intersection between this creative storytelling and technology that led me into, I like this kind of problem solving that comes about when you're trying to tell a story, but using a different medium, or you're using different technology like software, which is obviously what we do in animation now. So yeah, that's where it began, I guess.
So what is the animated film industry in Australia like at the moment?
Well, look, it's a booming industry. I think the animation industry globally is booming. Obviously, it was already leading that way because of the introduction, obviously, of streaming and VOD platforms across the world. And I think with COVID, it probably we were one of the industries that possibly benefited from the fact that, unfortunately, live action production became quite difficult to produce, and so there was more investment, I guess, available from those same streaming companies and VOD platforms to produce content that they could rely on, I think, in terms of production and delivery. And so that was probably one of the few upsides, I think, of that investment, in at least increased investment. Yeah.
You've produced a lot of animated movies, as mentioned earlier by the representative of the Australian Embassy. So tell us about 100% Wolf, because this film is also screened this weekend as part of the film festival. So 100% Wolf, how did it come about?
Well, 100% Wolf is actually based off a book, and funnily enough, an American producer who I'd met during the markets had tracked me down to say, I've found this book and it's written by an Australian author, and you should read it. It's something, I think it would make a great film. And we had just produced the very first Maya the Bee film, which did really well because it was a very well-known character from Europe. And we were able to raise the finance and produce that film as an independent animated film that did particularly well. And so we had the opportunity then to, I guess through track record, to try and go back to the similar investors and bring them on board something brand new. So 100% Wolf, we read the story, and we all fell in love with it. And in fact, the screenwriter who adapted the film is my husband. And
so sweet.
so it became very quickly the obsession in our household, this wonderful character. And yeah, we've had a very fun journey with it ever since, because we were also able to adapt the concept into a television series as well.
Oh my God, how nice. Wow. So currently is the television series already available for us to watch, or is it still in the process?
It is. It's finished. I'm not sure if it's been sold yet in Indonesia, but it's a good question. So I will find out for you.
That is so exciting. So how long did it take for you to produce 100% Wolf from the screenwriting process to finally releasing it for the audience to see?
Well, from that very first stage, I think we signed the rights deal around 2015.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Wow.
So it took a couple of years to write the film and raise the finance. And then it took 2 years to produce the movie itself. And the release has been quite disruptive because of COVID, unfortunately. Yes. And so in some countries, it was able to release before the pandemic. Just 1 or 2 countries, I think it was Vietnam, was the first place around the world. And then after that, it's been very much according to whatever local regulations were adjusted. So we certainly had a theatrical release in different parts of Europe, which was really fantastic. But there's also just been some really fabulous VOD releases as well in the US and also in Australia. So yeah.
So when you mentioned about the budget, how much was the budget for 100% Wolf, and which category does it belong to? Is it a small budget, medium budget, or a big budget movie?
It's a small budget film.
Wow, it looks fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. A small budget for animation would probably be anything under $20 million US. So our film was $14 million. And yeah, that's because we raised the finance without a studio, a US studio investment. But that also gives us a lot more flexibility in terms of the creative process. We essentially sign off on the film ourselves, which is always a really nice thing. But also then with distribution, it does give us a lot of opportunities to work with local distributors and tailor releases based on those markets rather than sort of a kind of global strategy. So yeah, that we've always tried to work with the in the independent space, I guess.
You mentioned about independent space. So what is this independent animation? Because all this time, what I'm familiar with at least is only like independent live action movies. So what is the difference between independent animation and non-independent animation?
Look, it really comes down to the financing and the structures behind the financing. So it's probably quite similar to what you would expect from a live action setting. We don't have, say, a Warner Brothers or Universal, for example, globally commissioning, owning all the rights and then releasing the film. So we very much own the film along with the Australian government, because they were one of the key funders of the feature, and we have I think possibly also the same in Indonesia, but there's a very determined, from various governments. I think it's holistically in Australia that there's a very sort of determined investment into local content and as a way of ensuring that we are telling stories from a uniquely Australian perspective. And in animation, as you'll know, it's certainly a genre that's very much dominated by US production houses and studios, and so it's difficult really to raise funding to get, as you mentioned, the quality of something that would attract the audience and make sure that you can sustain an audience, because they're also very used to seeing Disney and Pixar and Universal and DreamWorks.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking now, because we have so many young participants here and young or possibly aspired filmmakers. So what's your advice on the options for students or aspiring animators that currently, or they don't have any financial backing at all from established production company? You did mention about the importance of getting the funding from the government, but I guess, even the government has a limited budget for that. So where else should they go to make sure that they have enough funding to make their movies?
It's a good question. It's taken me a long time to find the right doors to knock on. Look, I think for any creative people, I'm sure it's the similar advice. You actually have to keep making things, making short films, writing. If you're sort of on the creator side, you really do need to be able to write or find writers to attach to your projects that that ultimately can tell a great story. And I think, what I've learned probably over the last couple of years especially is that often it really is only an idea that you're selling. And I think that Indonesia has fantastic talent. I think it's well known that there's great, particularly 3D animation skills, and certainly there's some really good studios I know already existing. So I think that you need to be a master of your craft. We at Flying Buck, we actually specialize in two quite different styles of animation. For 100% Wolf, that's a very traditional 3D digital style of animation, but we actually also specialize in a hand-drawn traditional style 2D animation, and in both respects there's a huge demand for that craft. And so I think it certainly requires a lot of practice, and really I don't think there's a shortcut to that. But I think as well, just writing stories, and I always say to people, and I think this is becoming even more relevant globally, that you should tell a story that means something to you, and the more personal and the more unique the setting, probably the more interesting it might be for buyers, because they've probably heard every kind of variation of most common stories, but what they don't have an abundance of is unique stories that might come from parts of the world that are less represented. And so I think, in Indonesia, you have a great opportunity there to be telling stories from your perspective, with obviously a great capacity to reach a huge audience locally, but then being able to tell that
60 million people.
Yeah. I think that's 10 times Australia. So there's already an opportunity locally, but I think as well those stories are interesting globally, and that's where you probably want to put the focus, I would think.
Yeah, I really like those 3 important points in making it, or in beginning your career as an animator here. That is start making short films. I guess that's very important to create portfolio, and also good writing. So engage yourself with good writers, and just to make sure that the writing or the story that they're presenting is uniquely Indonesian, because you're absolutely right, Babs, because we're competing with the USA, right? And it's very difficult if you don't have any unique points. They will say, what's the difference with the ones that we already find in the USA, right?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You mentioned about the 2D and 3D animations. What are the challenges? I mean, speaking of, in terms of challenges, which one is more challenging to make, and which kind, 2D or 3D, is best to tell what kind of story?
Mm-hmm. They're both really challenging, shall I say? I think it's all challenging, but to be, I think if, for example, you wanted to tell a story with a lower budget, and I mean sort of not sort of 14 million, but something like a short film, I would always lean toward 2D, because you could do it by yourself, or you could do it with another person. It requires just drawing, really, but at its absolute, obviously at the best, at your best. But the software is relatively cheap if you were to do it, digitally. And I think so. The entry in, I guess, there's less obstacles to being able to create something in 2D. With 3D. The technology demands there's a standard of kind of infrastructure that you need to be able to produce a certain quality. And usually the skill set in 3D is quite, it's not that common to have people who can do sort of everything in the software. So people tend to specialize within the software, whether it be in creating assets, like, for a set, for example, or a character, or it might be specialists who actually know how to use the controls to create animation itself. And then there's also a very technical aspect on the lighting and the way that the image is coming together in compositing software and so on. So these tend to be quite different sorts of people. On a short film, you can't always pay each other maybe the rates that you'd like to, and that becomes a bit problematic. And so unless it's in a school setting, in a university setting, we could perhaps do it together through your courses, which I'm sure they do that. It is more challenging, to do something of high quality in 3D with a low budget. But certainly, I think that telling a good story, you don't necessarily need to have something that that is using the most cutting edge technology. And sometimes we've all been moved by really quite simplistic animation, illustrative animation. So it's, for me, and that's why I'm a producer, I'm very passionate about story and making sure that whatever form of animation that you decide to use, that we will feel for your character. So that's the art, I think, of animation, is getting people to emote with these moving drawings, essentially.
Yeah. Do you have any software that is easily accessible, probably for these aspiring animators to practice with?
Yeah, look, all of the main software companies offer student software, so they do it at a much discounted rate. But there are free softwares. I know that Blender and Unreal, which is the gaming engine, a lot of people now are using that for television. We use Harmony. I know it's slightly more expensive than people would probably like to pay, but it does have a student rate as well. And we use Harmony because it does give us a lot of flexibility with 2D to bring in maybe 3D objects and things like that, and it's a very efficient software.
We have one question here already from one of the participants. This is from Rizky 3WP. He is from Institut Teknologi 10 November. This is what he says to you, Babs. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Hello, I would like to ask some questions. In this pandemic condition, is there a difficulty when producing the animation, like less minimum contact with other team, other difficulty with the finance, etc.? If there is, how did you solve those problems in this condition? Thank you very much. There you go, Babs.
That's a great question, or a couple of questions, really. Look, it has certainly been a challenge, I think, because like everyone, it wasn't clear, when restrictions would change. There were periods where we thought in Australia that we could work without too much disruption, and then there was a lot of disruption, and so it was very hard to predict. And I think that's what essentially made it more difficult for us, because we had a system already set up for remote work. We're a big company. We have a studio in LA. We have a sister company in France. We have one in Germany as well. And we do a lot of co-production. And so we were already quite used to setting up pipeline with people in India or Malaysia, and even in fact in Indonesia. But what was difficult was that the people that we are hiring, some of them were coming on into the company for the first time, didn't always have the right hardware or internet connections, or all this kind of thing that was quite specific. Yeah, the internet, I think, has been, for all of us, a challenge at times.
Yes.
So we were literally getting Ubers and putting equipment into, with drivers and sending them to people's homes to set them up. So, or some people would say, I can work from home, but I don't have a space for a desk, or this sort of thing. So we certainly had, I'm sure, similar challenges to people all around the world. But I think the main challenges we probably felt were around just ensuring our security for all of the data and the workflows that we have, because we have very big contracts with Disney and with Marvel, and they have very specific requirements around security. And I think that they were some of the shock costs that come along with these sort of things, because we really had to put some investment into making sure that our systems and our data and even the fact that people had to download content on their home devices and so on. This was really quite a challenge. Yeah.
Wow. How much more additional financial investment did you have to have because of this pandemic? Like sending the equipment, making sure that everything's fine, paying security.
It was expensive, but then I guess in other ways we had savings. Like, we didn't have such big power bills, and before the pandemic we had really big power bills. We also, we weren't traveling, but animation, and particularly, as film and television professionals, that we travel quite a lot, because that we're looking for buyers and money a lot of the time. So yeah, look, it's probably worked out, I would say, on balance. But it just was different sorts of people that were required, different kinds of consultants and that sort of thing. But I'm really proud of the fact we didn't have to let go of anybody during the whole time.
Wow, impressive.
Yeah, so we were very happy about that.
That's amazing. Yeah. You also mentioned earlier, if I heard it correctly, Babs, that you had some Indonesian animators as well working on the film.
Yes,
well, we have awesome.
Yeah, we do. We have a couple of really fabulous Indonesian people who actually moved to Australia pre-pandemic.
Wow.
And then have dual citizenship, or they're just working with us on visas. But and then we had a couple of people who ended up going home, but who still were able to work remotely for us. So yeah, the Kitakon is one of Kirikon was one of our animators who arrived as a student and was working and was studying in Australia, and when she started with Flying Bark, and that was in 2016, and she now is one of the senior supervisors in the company. So
that is so awesome. Oh my God. Do you know which school did she go to in Australia to learn how to make animation?
I think she went to UTS, but I can find out.
All right. Yeah. Well, there you go, guys. Aspiring animators, if you want to continue your, or if you want to study animation, definitely just down under, you can go to and pick and choose which university actually is a good place for you to learn animation. So this is perfect because there's one question from the participant that is connected to this topic. From Arif Rahman S. He is from ISI Yogyakarta. This is one of the best art schools in Indonesia. He asks, how do you see Indonesian animators? Is the competence of animators in Indonesia sufficient to make films independently and compete globally? Thank you. There you go, Babs.
Was the question specifically about individuals or the films, like the Indonesian films?
Individual. Okay. Probably you can talk about the Indonesian animators that you work with over the years.
Okay. Now, look, on our website, we advertise all our jobs there, and we're always advertising jobs there. We can never fill all the jobs we have. What happens is people submit their portfolios. So it's absolutely not a prerequisite that to go to university to work in the industry.
Wow. Okay.
So we take probably up to about 20. Yeah, maybe about 20 graduates a year. And I say graduates, but actually that could just be entry-level people into the industry. So we have a relatively large intake of people who are coming, I guess, into the industry. And a lot of those roles would be in the 2D animation team. It's sort of designed for that we bring them into the 2D teams and they're trained up through the course of doing things like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or projects like that. But on the 3D side, we do similarly, that people come in either on junior roles or they might already be a mid-level or senior level person. And since the pandemic, the requirement was much more about getting everybody to Australia because we have a lot of incentives for attracting people to work in Australia, but we certainly have a lot of flexibility now, and there's opportunities if people apply. What we tend to look for is the skills based on the portfolio work.
Okay.
But there's also a test. So if it's for example, a drawing test, or it could be a light and color, like so be taking an illustration and coloring that up to reflect certain lighting settings. It just depends on what the position is, but essentially anyone can apply. We've had people who've so desperately wanted to work at Flying Bark that they've taken 6 months and they've applied 3 times, and then they were lucky enough to, not lucky enough, I should say, they worked hard enough to get into the program, and then were able to stay. And in fact, that woman, she won our short film competition last year, and so we're going to fund her short film. So
you Flying Bark also has film competitions every year.
Yeah,
that is so cool. Yeah. Okay, what is the website of Flying Bark again?
Yeah. So look, please. I'm always encouraging people to check out what jobs there are, because it also gives you an insight into. I think when you look at some of the bigger studios, you can see what roles are in high demand. And then you could be thinking, oh, it looks like they're always needing compositing artists or 3D animation or so on. And that might, if you're interested in that, that might help you focus your skill set and your practice time, you know, around what jobs might be popping up all the time. So, you know, the big studios in Australia, well, in Sydney is Animalogic, who produced like the Lego Movie and so on. ILM, obviously Disney Studio, and Flying Bark as well. So, but we are an independent studio, as I said, and produce a lot of original content, like 100%.
That's really, really cool. So for those of you guys who are interested in seeing or knowing more, or probably working for Flying Bark Productions, you can go to flyingbark.com.au because they post everything there. This is so awesome. I'm even excited. I can't draw, but I'm excited for the participants here, I guess. Okay, more questions, Barbara. This is from Reynaldo. Okay, these are the questions I want to ask Barbara. I'm really interested about your Flying Bark studio. Firstly, why did you name it Flying Bark? What is the meaning or the philosophy behind that? And on the second one, I think you already answered. Is there any chance for us Indonesian animators to work there? I guess that second one was already answered. So why Flying Bark?
Okay.
What's the philosophy?
Well, actually, so I joined Flying Bark in 2009, and they renamed the studio only a couple of years before that. And I've been told it's sort of like company folklore, really, because I wasn't there. But I believe they had a competition, and people just threw out all different types of ideas. And one of the guys that I have no idea what Flying Bark was, but that was the name they all settled on, and everyone wanted the helicopter dog icon, which is, I think, very recognizable. And over the years, we've done a bit of work on perhaps the branding and making it feel kind of more modern, but there isn't really much of a story, only that one of the artists chose the name when they decided to rebrand the studio.
Okay. Thank you. Next question is from Gamal Institution. He's from Komi Studios. So the questions are, tell us the process to find investors or investments and how to convince them to fund our IP or your IP. The second question, how can we sell our IP to enter the international market, I guess, and how do we promote the film? There you go.
Okay. So based on most of the big VOD platforms, but I know there are also local VOD platforms and local networks as well, but I'll try and focus on the global ones, and because I'm not as familiar with what's happening locally. So in terms of the global platforms and channels, most of those offices will be regional. So they in some countries they may have a local office, so you might have some local buyers for, say, Disney in Indonesia, but more than likely,
we do have Disney here. Yeah,
you have Disney. So but if you want that sort of international type funding, I guess I think generally most of the offices are based out, the regional heads are based in Singapore. And I think what tends to happen is that you would probably work with someone locally to perhaps pitch a couple of ideas at early stages, to say, hey, is this something of interest? What are you looking for? I normally start all of my pitching meetings by asking, what are you looking for? And having some idea of what I know is working on that channel or that platform. You're doing a lot of comedy, are you looking for comedy, or are you looking for adventure? What are you looking for? And then if I get an answer that I think I can draw on, to help me tailor the pitch, that's what I will do. So I might pitch 100% more as a comedy than I would if they were saying, we're looking for, you know, an adventure story. So I think it's always good to be aware of the buyer, what they're looking for first before you pitch. But then I like to soft pitch, what I call soft pitching, which is just an early stage. Hey, we're thinking about making a show about, you know, rescue or something like that. And, you know, and then I wait to see the response. Oh, yes, actually, we were looking for something like that. Okay, great. And that's always a good way to start very early the conversation. And then the next time I'm seeing that person, I'm saying, so we've done all this work and we've got this great rescue show. And it's sort of a way of building up a relationship and a rapport. I personally don't recommend doing a whole amount of work, spending a lot of money and having a really polished, finished, you know, pitch Bible, this money on your art and your story without having a sense of what the market is looking for. But I think also authenticity, so making sure that you're working with creators and people that are willing to put their heart and soul into something. So if you're a producer,
for a long time, for years, because it takes patience to make an animated movie.
Exactly. So you know, you want to be sure that when you're going to the buyers that you've got, that you as selling something that somebody is ultimately going to take 100% control of making. And that, so for me, I look for creators, and I'm not looking for a team. I'm looking for the person who says, yeah, I'm going to make this film, or I'm going to make this show. And then I think once you've had all those initial conversations at the market, so you might go to, I think in Singapore, they have the television market toward the end of the year. There's a lot of film festivals throughout, you know, China and Hong Kong and so on. I'm sure in Indonesia you have global buyers coming locally as well. So I think having nice early conversations and introducing yourself and I'd say also having someone in the team with some track record working on some bigger format things is always good too. Yeah.
We have a live question here. So Guru Putra Anugrah, could you please turn on your video and also unmute yourself? You can ask your question directly to Babs. Guru Anugrah. Guru Putra Anugrah. Are you there? Hello.
Hi.
Still trying to connect.
Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Sorry. Saya nggak bisa nyalakan.
Oh ya, nggak bisa nyalain. Oke, nggak apa-apa. Oke, he cannot turn on his video.
Bisa sih, cuman panitianya kalau.
Oh, there you are. Hey.
Hi.
Voilà. Silakan, Guru.
So I actually want to ask some question, but first of all, Marisa, Anita, Kak Marisa, I am a big fan of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, Guru. Malu jadinya.
Karena aku taking sekolah jurnalistik dan aku sekarang ada di LSPR, di mana suaminya Kak Marisa pernah jadi dosen di situ.
That's correct. Yes. So he's just saying that he's taking journalism at the moment because I took my journalism school in Australia in Sydney Uni, and he's now taking it in Indonesia. Maybe for a master's degree, you can go to Australia as well. Silakan, Guru.
Okay. So referring to the question, I wanna ask some question. That this is the question. In the animation department, and seeing this, I feel that Indonesia has the potential to develop local animation products that can go worldwide. So in your opinion, is there a strategy or value that a local animation company in Indonesia should have in order to compete globally? Like we see DreamWorks or that can make children remember their favorite animation and character, and they really have a big demand for all the audience. So what do you think that maybe local animation company in Indonesia should do to, you know, compete globally? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Marissa, I'll just say back what I think the question was, because the internet was a little bit shaky there. But
so yeah, so it's basically he asked about the strategy, because if we want to compete, it means that we have to meet a certain international standard of an animation production. So what are the elements of this standard that is globally approved?
Okay. Well, look, I think the best thing you can do, I say this because it's what the strategy that we took, and it worked for us, and was that we very much had a diversified approach to our studio, where we said, okay, we will create original content and perhaps with a focus for the domestic audience. So we're really looking at things that we thought, okay, we know we could get a really nice audience here in Australia first and foremost, and then, you know, if we're getting the right partners, whether it be the ABC, for example, or Netflix or whoever, that this would be, for me, the first step, you know, making sure that we're making a show that we know will be appealing locally and do well locally, because that's the audience we know the best. And at the same time, we were also building the studio to work on what we call our client projects. So in Australia, we refer to the two markets in our screen industry: the domestic market, local stories, local content, local audience, and our international market, where we're doing work in Australia, but for, say, you know, what if, you know, with Marvel, or you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Nickelodeon, and so on. And what that allowed us to do was to build up relationships with a lot of creators in the US in particular. We were learning the skills beyond what we could have done just, you know, working year to year on our local content. So we started to really improve, I think, the quality. And if I had to say what is the value for a studio, I mean, it always will always be what quality can you produce, and that comes when we talk about quality. If it's a client project, we're talking about animation and the look and the lighting and the style and all of those things. When we're talking about original content, we're talking also about the quality of the characters, the story, the tone, the comedy, and so on. So it's a broad value, really, but it's the fundamental, and people will always really judge you on the work that you've done. Yeah. So that's also where taking on client work and producing it at a high quality allows you to go back and say, well, this is what we can do. And also those projects tend to be well funded. So there's more cash, I guess, in the business, because you're now being paid a kind of premium to do that work, and that helps you to use some of that money then to invest in things like development and working with local creators and this kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, we have the next question from Johannes Sujono. He's going to ask the question to you directly. Hi, Johannes. I think we're still waiting for him to be approved. Okay. Hi. Johannes, are you there?
Hello.
Hi. Yes. Please do ask your question.
My name is Johannes from Venus University, and I'm sorry, but I'm cheating. I have two questions. I'd like to ask, you mentioned that we should present stories that are uniquely local to buyers. What kinds of stories would you yourself be interested in from us here in Indonesia? Like what genres? And my cheat question is, any advice for how to enter short films into festivals? Well, thank you.
Thank you, Johannes. Okay, Babs.
Well, I mean, I think for the first one, I always say to my team, you know, people come to animation and unless they're looking at the niche of, say, anime, which is obviously an incredible and huge audience, so there's a very particular type of audience that want to enjoy anime style stories and production, and so I will just put that to the side because I think there's a huge value in that. But outside of anime, for me, animation is generally something that kids and families are watching together. It's light, it's light-hearted, and so I always like to say, I would always want something to be funny, because I think, the world is serious.
Yeah.
Kids have a lot of anxieties.
Yeah.
If we can present them with stories that take them away from that at times, that give them an outlet to have fun and to laugh. I mean, some of my favorite animations are things like SpongeBob, which are just totally ridiculous, really, but and also I love a lot of the animated films that were created when I was younger, from Disney days. So that aspirational, funny, uplifting, light-hearted story, for me, that's what I like when I'm talking about animation and it's also what's easier to sell. It is hard to do art house animation because it's already such a niche in itself. So yeah, I think, and really when I talk about personal stories, I mean, I think I'm Lebanese Australian. When I say that, I'm about third generation Australian, so I can't speak Arabic or anything, but I still have a very I have a large family, ethnic family, and all the cultural norms have been carried through the generations, and so it's not a typical sort of Anglo-Saxon perspective, I guess, my story, and there's a lot of comedy in the way that I think my family conducts itself and our story, and yet it's quite different probably to my neighbors. And so I think that is an example, I guess, of why I think personal stories can achieve a lot, because people don't know much about our individual histories and there's always things about people that are surprising, I think. And so it's also a really nice way, and I think this is what probably we're looking for in a global sense, looking for content that feels more accessible to a bigger audience. And so I think at this moment in time, stories that aren't perhaps traditionally Western with characters that we've seen over and over have a voice, and that's probably that's the way I would be wanting to pitch projects that were coming from Indonesia, that these are local voices, and to be cheeky maybe and getting things into film festivals, always looking at the cast, always looking at the voice talent, because having someone like Marissa or I'm sure people with public profile, or maybe even TikTok stars, it could be anyone that can help, that have an audience already, and that have some sort of public profile. That's always a really good thing when you're entering festivals, because festivals are like every other kind of business. They need to promote films and projects where they're going to get more audience and to raise their profile to be more successful ultimately. So always thinking about, how is this going to reach a big audience, or could this reach a big audience? That's the sort of thinking as a producer you should always kind of have in the back of your mind.
Right. And we have one more live question. This is from Jose Rimba. Jose, are you here?
Hello.
Hi. Yes.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Am I visible?
Yes, you are visible. Yes, you can ask your question to Babs.
Okay, good afternoon. I would like to ask a question regarding writing in animation. Throughout the years, I noticed animated shows have to strike a balance between story writing and animation quality. For example, a well-animated show can suffer from poor writing and vice versa as well. Throughout your years of experience, what common mistakes do you see in young aspiring writers and animators regarding story writing? And do you have any advice on improving? Thank you.
Great, good questions, Jose. Perhaps?
Really great question. So look, I think probably all screen content has a similar challenge. You know, writing it does certainly. It feels to me that writing is one of those skills that you need to practice a lot of. And what we do at Flying Bark is every new show that we create or every new show that we're funded to create, we bring on at least one or two writers who've never written on a long form series before, and why we do that is that it's the best experience, I think, is being in the real setting and sitting in a writer's room, watching other writers engage, learning that process. You know, there's very much a process of people sharing ideas, the best ones kind of simmering to the top, being able to take an idea and then adapt that into the setting of a show. And that skill set is something that I think you need to do live, you know, and I believe that process works best actually in person. But I know we've had to do a couple of shows during COVID entirely with Zoom, and my husband has a giant whiteboard that he now is now part of our furniture in the house. And I must say, I'm not a fan of the big whiteboard that lives in the living room, but
oh dear.
It has the whole plot lines of all the episodes of 100% Wolf. So, you know, it has to stay. I think having a writing mentor is something we always encourage people to do. So we have script producers or we have script editors, or just, you know, and a lot of writers are very open to this, but finding a writer that may have that sort of experience and asking them, you know, could you be my mentor? Can you peer review my work? Is also a good idea. And of course, writing, that I should probably say. So just writing a lot, and sending samples. There's so many writing competitions now. I'm sure you also have them in Indonesia, but you could enter some of the global ones. And in most cases, they give some feedback on the writing itself. So, yeah, I hope I've answered the questions okay.
I think you have. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you so much, Babs, for sharing your knowledge and expertise in the industry. Hopefully, this masterclass has inspired a lot of aspiring filmmakers or aspiring animators here to probably, you know, I don't know, like 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, they'll be joining Flying Bark Productions and working for your animation movies. The thing about independent studios is that, you know, the stories that are created from independent studios tend to be very, very unique. So yeah, keep at it. Success to you, Babs, and definitely to Flying Bark Productions. Thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. And thank you as well to all of the participants. We have 286 people here. Can you imagine it in a room joining in? So yeah, thank you, Babs. I know that you still have other things to do. I will say goodbye for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. It's a pleasure.
Bye, Babs. Nah, itu tadi masterclass bersama dengan Barbara Steven dari Flying Bark Productions. Masterclass ini masih ada satu lagi, teman-teman. Jadi kalau misalnya teman-teman tertarik untuk mengetahui lebih lanjut mengenai produksi ya, atau menjadi produser, tadi kan kita ngomongin tentang producing animation. Nah, besok kita akan ngomongin producing live action movies. siapa narasumbernya. Narasumbernya adalah produser Indonesia Mira Lesmana. Jadi kalau misalnya mau gabung langsung aja buka websitenya di www.fsai2022.com. Kamu langsung daftar di situ. Dan bagi teman-teman yang pertanyaannya tadi belum sempat dijawab sama Babs, teman-teman dari Kedutaan Australia sudah bilang bahwa bisa mohon dituliskan saja ke email pd.indonesia@dfat.gov.au. Udah aku taruh juga di chat situ ya, teman-teman ya. Alright, I guess that's about it for today's masterclass. Saya akan kembalikan lagi ke Regina. Regina, take it away.
Thank you, Marisa, and thank you, Barbara, for a very insightful and fun session. Dan terima kasih juga rekan-rekan semuanya untuk pertanyaannya. Sesuai yang saya tadi sampaikan, kita sudah pilih 3 penanya beruntung, oke? Yang tadi sudah bertanya di sesi tanya jawab, yaitu yang pertama Rizky Tri WP dari Institut Teknologi 10 November, kemudian Arif Rahman dari ISI Yogyakarta, dan Yohanes Sujono. Sekali lagi, 3 pemenangnya adalah Rizky Tri WP dari Institut Teknologi 10 November, kemudian Arif Rahman dari ISI Yogyakarta, dan Yohanes Sujono. Silahkan kirim data kalian berisi nama, nomor HP, dan juga alamat ke email cultural.jakarta@gmail.com. Culturalnya cultural.jakarta@gmail.com. Oke, cultural.jakarta@gmail.com. Ditunggu hari ini ya. Dan teman-teman, sebelum kita mengakhiri sesi kita hari ini, saya ajak kita semua untuk sama-sama mengabadikan momen ini dengan mengambil zoom foto. Oke, let's take a picture together. Saya akan hitung 1 sampai 10 untuk teman-teman boleh bersiap-siap menyalakan kameranya ya. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, dan lupa senyum, 10. Tahan. Oke. Terima kasih teman-teman untuk partisipasinya, sudah mengambil gambar bersama dengan kami. Terima kasih sekali lagi kepada Kementerian Pariwisata dan Ekonomi Kreatif Republik Indonesia, Bina Nusantara School of Design, dan Universitas Kristen Petra Surabaya sebagai partner kami atas kerjasama Masterclass yang baru saja kita adakan. Seperti yang tadi Marisa bilang, kita masih punya 1 film masterclass lagi yang akan diselenggarakan besok, 25 Februari jam 10 waktu Indonesia Barat atau jam 11 waktu Indonesia Tengah. Jadi teman-teman yang mau mendaftar jangan lupa langsung pergi ke website fsai2022.com atau fsai2022.com, karena acaranya gratis tapi tempatnya terbatas, teman-teman. Oke, itu aja dari saya. Teman-teman, terima kasih sudah bergabung dengan kami siang hari ini. Semoga acara ini dapat menginspirasi kalian dalam berkarya di industri film animasi Indonesia. Sampai jumpa!
Thank you teman-teman semua. Sehat selalu. Bye!